Good morning, everyone. This time we are now at the chapter 10 of our book, in which we will discuss the personality assessment and behavioral assessment. In our topic, we will be presenting different approaches or methods in evaluating people's personality or a person's personality and behavior, which are created by our clinical psychologists. But before we proceed on identifying such particular assessments or approaches, let me present to you the three major themes that we need to consider. First, we have the multi-method assessment. Second, the evidence-based assessment. And of course, our third theme is the culturally competent assessment. According to the book, there is no such thing as a perfect personality test. Well, some have high reliability, some has also high validity and high clinical utility, but they still all have their own limitations. That is why clinical psychologists must be careful not to rely only on a single assessment method. And that concept will lead us to our first theme of assessment, which is the multi-method assessment. According to the book, multiple approaches, which is the concept of multi-method assessment, are said to be the best approach assessing personality. With this type of approach, the clinical psychologist could assess the client through multiple methods, including tests of different types, interview data, observations, and many more. Even though these processes takes different approaches to the client, they could still make similar conclusions. And with that, the clinical psychologist could create a reliable conclusion. Another thing about multi-method assessment is that it could be utilized both in informal and professional settings. So to help you better understand the given concept, let me give you an example. So, let me tell you a story. Ayan. Story yan ni El Marino and ni El Marina. And just like the multi-method assessment, yung mga psychologist is nagkakandak sila ng different types of test para makita yung commonality sa results. So, for example, ilagay natin na sa dating. Ayan. Ikumpara natin sa dating yung concept ng multi-method assessment. Iba yung ipinapakita iba yung personality na pinapakita ni El Marino at El Marina kapag they are together, kapag they are with friends, and kapag with their family. Well, sa story ni El Marino at El Marina, nakilala ni El Marina si El Marino na isang sweet, gentleman, and funny guy si El Marino. Kaya naman na-fall in love si El Marina. Kaya, sinagot niya ito. And then, one day, no, na magkasama sila sa ibang sitwasyon naman, yung hindi lang silang dalawa lang, napakilala nila yung isa't isa sa mga friends nila at ibang situation naman yun or ibang setting para sa kanilang dalawa. Tapos, na-find out ni El Marina na si El Marino is iba siya with friends. Kasi kapag silang dalawa lang, he is sweet, gentleman, tsaka funny. Kapag with friends, nawala na yung sweetness niya. Pero, gentleman pa rin at funny si El Marino. So, ayun na. Mas nakilala ni El Marina si El Marino. And after that, after months or years na lumipas, ayun, ipinakilala na ni El Marino si El Marina sa kanyang family at ganun din si El Marina. Pinakilala niya na din si El Marino. And this time, may na-find out na naman si El Marina. Yung ugali ni El Marino is iba na. Kung with friend, kung kapag silang dalawa lang, sweet, funny, and gentleman si El Marino. And kapag with friends naman is gentleman na lang tsaka funny si El Marino. With family, nawala na yung sweetness at pagiging funny ni El Marino. Pero, gentleman pa rin si El Marino. Kaya parang na-conclude ni El Marino na, so, gentleman talaga tong taong to. Kaya, dahil doon, ayan, they live happily ever after. Char! So, ganun din sa multi-method assessment. Makikita ng clinician yung commonality or yung pagkapare-pareha ng results or kung ano yung palaging ipinapakita ng client sa mga results. So, for example, hindi siya masyadong cool or parang hindi siya masyadong okay with others, parang hindi siya komportable in social or socializing people. So, kung palaging ganun yung lumalabas sa mga result niya, pwedeng sabihin ng clinician na yung client niya is introvert. Ayan, parang ganun yung multi-method assessment. Kahit iba-iba yung type of test na ika-conduct ng clinician, magiging reliable to kasi kukunin niya yung magkapare-parehong result galing sa magkakaiba-ibang test. Ayan. Yun yung multi-method assessment. So, to relate their story in a more professional context, the same process is also shown by clinical psychologists who use different types of personality tests to get to know a client. Ayan. Kagaya ng sabi ko kanina. That's why, always remember that in multi-method assessment, even though each method offers a unique perspective and although some may be more enlightening than others, it is the integration of multiple methods that ultimately proves most informative. Ayan. So at this moment, let us move forward to our second approach, which is the evidence-based assessment. So, clinical psychologists who practice evidence-based assessment select only those methods that have strong psychometrics, including reliability, validity, and clinical utility. Moreover, they select tests that have sufficient normative data or standardized criteria and are sensitive to issues of diversity such as age, gender, care, and ethnicity. So, in evidence-based assessment, guys, clinical psychologists carefully choose those tests that would truly work for the client and would effectively assess the client in the manner in which they should be assessed. The type of evaluation approach here is to figure out what works for the different types of clients, such as what works if assessing clients with ADHD, what works if assessing clients with depression, or what works if assessing clients with schizophrenia or any other clinical issues. So, for example, according to Persons and Fresco in 2008, they stated that the structured clinical interview for DSM-5 and the Beck Depression Inventory 2 are specifically identified as highly recommended instruments for diagnosing depression in adults. According to them, using these two assessment methods would help the clinician in determining whether or not his adult client is depressed. But the real question here is that how do researchers determine what works when assessing particular clinical problems? Or in other words, how would we identify the evidence-based assessment from the rest? Well, that is one of the challenges of evidence-based assessment before, especially in its early development. But of course, to answer the question, we can quantitatively measure some of the strengths or weaknesses of an assessment method through reliability measures such as test, retest, reliability. So to recap the definition of this type of reliability measure, it is the consistency of results when you repeat the same test on the same sample at a different point in time. You use it when you are measuring something that you expect to stay constant in your sample. So evidence-based assessment truly has a significant impact or influence over the context of evidence-based approaches in healthcare. That is why there are those in the field that reminds us that not every decision within a clinical assessment should be predetermined by the instructions of guidebooks or manuals. Ayan. For example, Summers Flanagan in 2009 stated that these manuals cannot address nuances in human interaction. Nuances that sometimes elicit anger or tears, and these manuals cannot adequately guide clinicians on when to self-disclose and when to just listen, how to respond to client questions, or effective methods for establishing rapport with a living, breathing, culturally unique individual whom they want to help. That is why when using evidence-based assessment, it is truly advised to rely on methods with demonstrable reliability, validity, and clinical utility. Those assessment methods that does not only recommended by few known individuals, but those which would strongly demonstrate or show the three important psychometrics. So today, it is still one of the current challenges of our clinicians because it is really difficult to integrate what would really works empirically. And now for the third approach, we have the culturally competent assessment. So before we discuss this type of assessment, let us first define some terms. We have the cultural competence. It is said that it is essential across all activities of clinical psychologists, especially personality assessment. It is it is to carefully identify what is normal and abnormal in various cultures. The second term, we have cultural malpractice. The cultural malpractice is a personality assessment conducted without knowledge or sensitivity to these cultural specifics. Another term called overpathologizing means viewing something as abnormal, which in fact is culturally normal. So both of these terms warn us that failing to understand culture could place us in danger or could lead to a bigger issue. That is why the clinicians or the clinical psychologist must understand the essence of an action. Um, Also, the thought or emotions of the client in the context of their culture, which may differ from the psychologist's own view or perspective. So, as an example of pathologizing, considering the story of Mr. Duron and Dr. Platt. So, ayan, story time na naman tayo. So, ito si Mr. Duron, guys. Ayan. Siya yung, he is a black African, American African, na nag-approach siya ng isang clinical psychologist kasi nagsasuffer siya ng depression. Para sa kanya, parang nagsasuffer siya ng depression tsaka abusive na siya sa alcohol. So, ayun, hindi lang naman siya yung nag push sa self niya. urge din to ng family niya. Kaya ayun, nakadecide si Mr. Duron na lumapit kay Dr. Platt na isang clinical psychologist. Ayun. So, while nag-i-interview si Dr. Platt, marami siyang mga tanong na personal tungkol kay Mr. Duron. Ito naman si Mr. Duron, parang suspicious siya. Parang palagi siyang nagtatanong, kailangan pa bang talagang sagutin yan? Yung tanong na, kailangan pa ba yan? Di ba pwedeng hindi ko yan sagutin? Ayan. So, parang palaging umaano si Mr. Duron. Ayaw niyang pag-usapan ng mas malaliman yung personal na life niya or buhay niya. Kaya ayun, si Dr. Platt, na-conclude niya agad na parang masyadong suspicious tong taong to. Tsaka, bakit parang natatakot siya na tanungin? Or baka, ayun, may mga nabubuo ng teorya si Dr. Platt. Kaya, nagpa-undergo siya ng maraming test kay Dr. Duron, pero hindi niya binitawan yung kung ano yung teorya niya. Kaya, yung conclusion ni Dr. Platt, may paranoia si Mr. Duron. Which in fact, guys, hindi tinignan ni Dr. Platt yung culture ng mga American African. Kasi si Dr. Platt, he is white American. Yung pure siya na American. So, para sa kanya, parang normal naman na para sa isang clinical psychologist na itanong tong mga ganitong question. Pero nakalimutan niya na sa cultures ng mga doctor, ng mga Black African, because of their past, no, yung mga ancestors nila is even today is mayroon pa ring racism. Pero noon is mas miserable kasi may slavery. Kaya ganun na lang si Mr. Duron na hindi masyadong nag-trust kay Dr. Platt kasi aware siya na he is black and Dr. Platt is a white guy. Hindi yun nakita na anggulo ni Dr. Platt kasi hindi niya kinonsider yung culture ni Mr. Duron. Ayan. Yun yung story nila. So, in Duron's case, the clinician was the root, no? Si Dr. Platt yung root cause of the cultural bias. Bias may result from a number of other resources during personality tests, including the test and the method of service delivery. So, in the Philippines, kapag sabihan nating test, no, bias sa test, in the Philippines, na parang sa own observation ko lang, lalo na dun sa kinonduct ng guidance sa atin, is that yung questionnaire, parang American-based siya. So, yung mga tanong doon is, may mga nakahalong culture ng Amerika na hindi familiar or hindi naman na-experience ng usual Filipino. So, ayun. Isa yun sa mga nakita ko na bias sa pagkakonduct ng, I don't know if I'm wrong or right but correct me if I'm wrong. So, sa service delivery method naman, it is the way the clinician uses the test. So, ito yung mali ni Dr. Platt. There could be interpersonal interaction or approach that is not familiar for a specific culture. So, yung approach ni Dr. Platt kay Mr. Duron is hindi familiar for Mr. Duron o hindi comfortable si Mr. Duron dun sa ganun na approach. Kasi nga, Kaya siya laging suspicious. It's because of the culture, the tradition, or yung parang attitude na ng kanilang lahi or ng kanilang race. Ayan. But all in all, whether the bias stems from the test itself or nagmula man ito sa service delivery method, take note that everything that happened during the test or assessment are all under the responsibility of the clinician. So, it is really important for the clinicians or for us, kung sino man yung mga future clinicians, yung nakikita nyo na talaga na future clinician na ako. So, ayun. It is really important na always maging careful sa process. Ayun. Na i-avoid yung bias. So, now, we are done with our 3 major themes. And again, the multi-method assessment is the conduct of different types of tests and getting the commonality of those different tests. Yun. Magko-conclude ka ng kung ano yung kaparehong resulta galing sa iba't ibang test. Ayan. Second is the evidence-based assessment. Ito yung hahanapin mo kung ano yung magwo-work talaga sa patient. So, ayun, advice ng iba is from the experience itself, kung nakita na ng isang clinician na, uy, itong test na to is parang accurate siya kapag depression yung gusto kong i-assess, kung schizophrenia yung gusto kong i-assess. Ayun, ito yung mga assessment na dumaan talaga sa research. So, yun yung second evidence-based assessment. And lastly, the cultural competent assessment, which is palaging tandaan na i-avoid yung bias. Palaging i-check yung culture background ng client para maibalanse yung result or diagnosis or conclusion. So this time, let us move on with the 2 types of personality tests. Ayan. We have the objective personality test and projective personality test. So, first, let me define what is objective personality test. Ayan. This include unambiguous test items, offer clients a limited range of responses, and are objectively scored. Most often, the objective personality test that clinical psychologists use are questionnaires that clients complete with pencils and paper, or in some cases, on a computer. So, they usually consist of direct, brief statement, or questions with true or false or MCQ, or even in the form of rating scale options for clients to show how much the statement or question relates to the client. So, tests such as 16PF, the MBTI or the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, and the MMPI. So, later, mas i-elaborate yan ng mga kasama ko sa grupo. Kaya, ayun, mga examples lang muna yung ma-represent ko. I believe na it is already familiar to everyone kasi we encountered the few of them in our previous subjects. So, in other words, in short, objective personality tests assess an individual's personality in a way that is not influenced by the clinician's personal beliefs. Kasi nga, objective. Yan. From the word objective itself. So, as a result, it is said to be free from rater bias. So, ayan. ma-avoid yung bias ng nagre-rate kasi close-ended yung mga questions. Hindi lalabas sa question or sa given answer or options yung answer ng client. Kaya ayun. And for the next and my last discussion, let me define what is projective personality test. According to the book, projective personality tests feature ambiguous stimuli and an open-ended range of client responses. They are based on the assumption that clients reveal their personalities by the way they make sense of vaguely defined objects or situations. So, unlike objective personality tests, this one does not depend on the questionnaires or the given options. The client here has the freedom to express itself without any limitations or boundaries. Yung test niya, mga example niya ay meron tayong thematic perception test. We also have draw a person test and the Rorschach test or the ink blot test and many more. In short, it creates opportunities for the client to build the responses in terms of their individual personality characteristics. Kasi, yung presence of interpretations here serves as a way to uncover unconscious feelings that might be causing the client's personal problems. So, ayun, kung kaya objective is close-ended siya, so, maa-avoid yung rater bias. Dito naman kay projective test, hindi naman sa mas may advantage si objective. Dito sa projective, dito mo ma-uncover yung unconscious pattern or yung unconscious feelings ng client na pinagmumulan ng kanyang clinical issue or personal issue. Ayun. So, meron pa ring advantage si projective test. And I believe that's the end of my discussion. And for further information, Mr. Villarosa and Mr. Bulando will continue to discuss our topic. Thank you, everyone, and mabuhay!